Hey, thanks for joining me. We're back with Wildcats, issue 31. Wasn't too long ago I did issue 30 of Wildcats, so why am I back to it so quickly? Well, issue 30 was a massive disappointment because the artist that we're here to watch and be kind of blown away by, Travis Charest, he only drew the first 5 pages, and he really half-assed all of them. I mean, don't get me wrong, they still look good, but when he's kind of just using repeating panels and shortcuts to get out of it, it's kind of frustrating. And then they had another artist take over the rest of the book, who is, of course, certainly competent, but it's not the same thing. We're there for Travis Charest artwork, and then it was of course I think it was the Fire from Heaven crossover, which I made no bones about. Like, I couldn't have cared less. I hate these crossovers that cover multiple titles. I'm not necessarily collecting every Wildstorm book, and it feels like I want to say scam. That's maybe kind of harsh because it's a business and they're trying to get you interested in other books, but it feels, for lack of a better term, a scam to start getting you picking up other comics that they make. It's a valid attempt. It's a valid thing, but I ain't going to do it because at this point, what year are we at this point in this book? 96. So, I've been picking up these Image comics. I'm sorry, I forget if they started in 92 or 93. But, I kind of know what Wildcats and I kind of know what the Wildstorm universe of books are like. And honestly, they're not that interesting. I'm sorry. I know there's those of you out there that are just the biggest fans. And that's fine. Just because I say I didn't like it doesn't mean it has to take away from your enjoyment of it, right? But I mean, come on, for real. There's very few of these stories that really stick out and make you go, oh my God, the story was so great. Jim Lee put together a studio of extremely competent artists that it feels like he demanded the best from, and they all wanted to do the best. And between out of the Image creators that had big studio and team books and all that stuff, the Wildstorm, the Top Cow, the Extreme Studios, it was a kind of a toss up between Top Cow and Wildstorm as to who you could kind of make the argument who had the best roster of artists at the time. It is kind of up to you. But anyway, the point being is that none of these stories were really that interesting. I do go out of my way to shout out that Alan Moore writing Wildcats made it more interesting than it had ever been. I kind of get the feeling that Alan Moore is just kind of reading these, the backstories of these characters and just kind of not giving a shit. He's like, all right, let's just do some crazy stuff and have some fun. And he made the book legitimately entertaining. So, it's when I think back to these early Wildstorm days, the things that I remember from the early days are when Alan Moore took over Wildcats and made it interesting, and then the eventual rise of J. Scott Campbell on Gen 13. And beyond that, in terms of stories, I don't remember a thing. Later on down the line, there were certain things that certainly popped up and became more memorable, like when Warren Ellis took over Stormwatch and turned it into the Authority. Brilliant stuff. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. For some reason, I have 2 copies of this book. And I seem to have multiple copies of Wildcats comics more than anything. And I'm pretty sure that that's because since I've started my channel, I've had several people, very, very nice folks who I've met through the channel, send me boxes of books. And I seem to get a bunch of duplicates in that respect because I never, ever bought more than 1 copy of a thing. I didn't have that much money. And to me, I wasn't one of those guys. I hear people saying I bought 1 copy to slab to keep it perfect forever, and I bought 1 to trade, and then I bought 1 to read. That is some bullshit. Even if it wasn't a matter of money on my end, I am not buying multiple copies of any comic. I just have the one that I bought, and I kind of take care of them. I don't treat them as precious. It's not like, remember that episode of Simpsons where they Bart and Milhouse and oh my God, what's the nerdy kid? I can't remember his fucking name. It's going to drive me nuts. I can't think. Anyway, the issue with the the comic book that they bought, Radioactive Man, and they were reading it, and they had tweezers that they would burn in fire to sterilize it before they'd carefully turn the pages to, to preserve the comic and put it in the bag. Treating these things as precious. I absolutely treated none of my comics as precious cargo. I took care of them. They were important to me. I did not want them ripped up or shredded or destroyed. But I would pick these things up and read them and flip them open and enjoy them. So I guess I'm one of the weird ones like that. Anyway, we don't need 2 copies. We just need the one. So we get a shot of the team. So this is penciled, the cover, by Jim Lee, inked by Richard Bennett. And it looks pretty good. I don't know. I kind of like that all these characters are kind of not in costume exactly. They're just kind of hanging out in just, it's sort of like street clothes. It looks kind of good. I kind of dig it. As far as art, story is Alan Moore, and it says layouts are Jim Lee with Josh Weisenfeld. Who the hell is Josh Weisenfeld? That is a very specific and distinct last name, of which I'm aware of Aaron Weisenfeld, that incredible artist who did the Team 7 series. And then he did what I thought was his greatest comic work, was that Wolverine Deathblow crossover. Little tangent. If any of you are a fan of Aaron Weisenfeld, go on to Facebook. There is a Wildstorm comic group, and they are putting together one of those fan-made artist editions, and they're taking pre-orders for it right now. They've got it all put together, and the more of us that are involved, the cheaper the copy of the book becomes for everybody. It's like anything. The greater quantity, the bigger discount you get. So if you like Aaron Weisenfeld and his Wildstorm work, and you want a very limited edition, never to be seen again, artist edition of his work, again, go to Facebook, find the Wildstorm page, and there is a sign up for it. And it's one of those things where it's fan-made, and it's not like one of these ones offered from where Image Comics puts together an artist edition or IDW or something like that. These are books made by fans for fans, and it's a unique one-off that you'll never see anywhere else. So I have one of Nick Manabat that I've shown on the channel a couple times, and every time people see it, they're like, God damn it, if I would have known this thing existed and would have been possible to pick up, I would have picked it up. So again, if you like Aaron Weisenfeld's work, go find the Wildstorm page on Facebook and sign up and get your copy. It's going to be a pricey artist edition. It could be up to $150. That looks like it might be the high end if there's too few people picking it up. But if enough people get on board, it could get down to like $120. So it's a full 11x17 high resolution scan of the actual comic itself, or his comic art. And no, I'm not being paid to make this statement to everybody, but I'm all about just spreading the word. I would like to know about these kinds of things. And so if you're interested in it, go get it. It's going to be an awesome thing. I'm really looking forward to it. Anyway, back to what we're talking about here. Layouts from Jim Lee with Josh Weisenfeld. Who the hell is that? With finishes by Richard Bennett. So when it says layouts, that to me immediately means like Jim Lee and whatever this Josh guy did, very basic kind of penciling, not the full penciling, rendering, finishing like you find typically in a comic book. It's just the most basics. And then Richard Bennett, he loves to finish the shit out of these things. Like he goes to town and adds tons of detail. I actually kind of like Richard Bennett finishing Jim Lee. It's no disrespect meant to Scott Williams, but it just gives it a different flavor. That being said, the layouts in this thing by Jim Lee with this Josh Weisenfeld, there are places where I'm like, this is pretty weak stuff, all things considered. Some of it looks very much Jim Lee, and some of it looks like a very lazy version. I also have to mention, it says special thanks here to Carlos de Anda, D''Anda, and Trevor Scott. There is a couple of images in here where I feel like this Carlos de Anda He's doing the penciling on it. It says special thanks to them. So he must have helped somewhere, some way, somehow. He eventually took over penciling on Divine Right. And he's maybe one of the closest Jim Lee clones out there. It's pretty shocking. But anyway. Oh, also, Travis Charest does a couple of pages in this. Again, it's just a few pages, but they look pretty dang good. So we start out in the aftermath of the whatever the fuck, the Fire from Heaven crossover. And I didn't read that. I didn't know how things actually wound up. But there's supposed to be a really big, important thing that we're all supposed to be very sad over. We're not, but we're supposed to be. And that's kind of illustrated here. You got Grifter. He's walking along, and this is, you kind of can't see it. You don't ever get to see his face. But this is Deathblow, Michael Cray. And apparently, in the Fire from Heaven crossover, he died. And this is supposed to be a major character death. We're all supposed to be very, very sad. I guarantee you we're not. But Grifter is. And so he's got this where he's walking along. He's like, where the hell are we? On the moon? Are we on an alien planet? What is this place? And Deathblow, again, we don't get to see his face because he's dead. So this is implicating this is the afterlife, maybe. The idea that you don't get to see his face. Deathblow here says it's both those places. It's everywhere men ever came to fight and die. We've both been here before. And Grifter says, well, yeah, you're right. It does seem sort of familiar. So why don't I feel comfortable here? And Deathblow says, because you're not dead. And then Grifter wakes up from a nightmare screaming Mike's name. What are they, lovers? Just fine. And then he just kind of sits on the edge of his bed in the dark. Apparently he sleeps naked. Everyone fucking sleeps naked. Come on, no one does that. But then it cuts to Grifter. He's gotten up and he's gearing up in his Grifter outfit and he's putting his mask on. And Alan Moore actually writes something that did kind of stick with me from a story perspective. The text, the inner monologue thoughts from Grifter, it says, when you wake up crying, man, that's the worst. That's when this mask comes in really useful. So Grifter, who's this tough, hard-ass warrior soldier, the death of his buddy, Michael Cray, Deathblow, he's having these horrible nightmares about it, and he's literally waking up crying. It's kind of an interesting character moment. It also kind of makes him feel like a little bit like a pansy. And I only say that because these are comic books with tough guy superheroes that are blowing the hell out of monsters and creatures and everything. But, you know, Alan Moore is trying to inject a little bit of humanity into it, and I get it, and I like it. It works. So he goes wandering around down the hallway, and you hear this voice speaking. It's Tao, this character that's been introduced. I'm fairly certain that this character, I was going to say created by Alan Moore, but it might be James Robinson. I can't remember the issue that he was introduced in where there was James Robinson writing or Alan Moore, but Alan Moore took him and made him really interesting. But he's kind of like the super brains of the group. Like he's just hyper, super intelligent. And they decided to, once the regular Wildcats team went off into space to go visit their home planet, the secondary team was formed on Earth, and they decided that they're going to take over the role of the Wildcats team since the main team is off world, and what they're going to do is be more proactive against fighting the villains. Rather than sitting around and waiting for these villainous characters to do something bad, they're just going to go after them. They're just going to go get them. And it hasn't turned out the way that they kind of wanted. So now there's basically this gang war going on. All these villainous organizations have gotten together and they're sick of this new Wildcats team. And so now all the bad guys got together to take on the Wildcats and start some shit. And so now it's just blown up into this big battle. So the Wildcats have even had to join up with Stormwatch. And so now there's just big fights going on everywhere. And Tao is basically coordinating the entire thing. He's kind of saying, you know, Fuji squad's there, intercept at 5th Avenue, Majestic, the Zombots are coming out of the East River, etc., etc. Maul and Warblade, go here. Void, go here. He's just like a game master moving pieces on the board, literally, right here in front of us. Grifter shows up behind there, and this is Savant. She's the sister of Zealot. She's relatively interesting. And they kind of run into each other, and Grifter's like, you know, this crime war seems pretty crazy. Now that we've returned from space, we've kind of had to join you into it, you know, into the whole fight this thing that you guys started. Your boyfriend there, Tao, seems to have everything bolted down, and this savant character and Tao have kind of gotten into a relationship, which is like, all right, that's kind of interesting. Why not? This is a really weird picture here. This is Grifter with his hands in his coat pockets. This is supposed to be Jim Lee layouts, but that looks really odd. And this picture of Tao over here looks really odd. So I feel like whatever Jim Lee's contribution to this book was, it's not that much. It's very, like, probably just basic, super sketchy stuff, and then handing it off to the other artist to kind of finish it up. And that's fine, but it doesn't look like Jim Lee stuff. None of this does. Like, the faces have Jim Lee structure, but it's just not the greatest. But anyway, he's like, yeah, you two, Tao, Savant, you're together. That's awesome. Things are pretty serious. She's like, yeah, I'd die for him. Sorry to hear about Cray, Michael Cray, Deathblow. She says, incidentally, he was a good human being. And so Grifter takes off, and he's thinking to himself, he says, good human being. I heard of those, usually in obituaries. Maybe I'll head over to Grand Central Station. I need to see Zealot. I need her voice to soothe me. So Grifter has been in a relationship off and on sort of with Zealot since the comic started. Some kind of unspoken relationship. And he's like, well, I don't need to hang out with these two. I got to go find someone who soothes me and makes me feel normal. So now we cut over to Zealot, and she's hanging out with Ladytron. And I have to say, this Ladytron character, again, I'm pretty sure Alan Moore introduced her. I've had some people in the comments say that she's just Tank Girl, that indie character I know nothing about beyond her existence, and there was a movie based on her back in the 90s with Lori Petty that I watched once, and I thought it was one of the dumbest things I'd ever seen. So I don't know anything about the character in terms of what the comic is like. But some people have said Ladytron is just written like Tank Girl. I don't know. I don't care. If it is, that's fine. But boy, Alan Moore seems to have a lot of fun writing her. She is just hilarious in everything that she says. And there's tons of dialogue from her throughout this book. And I feel like it's Alan Moore having a little bit more fun because she's a new character, so you can put anything in her mouth that you want. Because the other characters are already established characters, you kind of have to stay on model for the boss that you're working for. But Ladytron, you can do anything. So it starts out with her. She's like got this gum, in her hand, and it's stretched out between her hand and her mouth. And Zealot, who's this like hardcore, super serious, centuries-old warrior babe bitch, she does not like this young half-robot clown. And so Zealot's yelling at her. She says, for the last time, you slut-mouth, hubcapped, uttered piece of street sewage, this is a combat situation. I have seniority here, and you will obey my orders, or I will slice you into shavings. And Ladytron's sitting there with like her hand gesturing around her crotch area. And she says, she just kind of scoffs at her, says, what, with that big shiny cock substitute you keep waving around? If I was you, I'd keep it in my pants, Besides, it makes people nervous. They're all like thinking like, whoa, look out, everybody. It says here, Ivana Trump finally found her cutlery drawer. That's some probably cultural relevant thing that I don't get the gag. I don't remember. But anyway, and Zealot's had enough of it. She says, I'll kill you, you chromium crack whore. And then it's right then when Spartan comes flying down. He's like, hold it, what's going on? So what I find funny is, I say this often about Alan Moore's writing, is he shows up and he interjects humor in a way that's very subtle. And it's not very subtle here, but I just don't think Alan Moore fucking gives a shit about these characters. So he's just going to throw in the humor anywhere. And you know what? It makes for an entertaining read. And they still feel on model. They still feel like the characters that they're supposed to be. But I just feel like he's just having fun with it. But yeah, this isn't the kind of dialogue you'd ever expect to hear coming out of these characters' mouths when Wildcats first started, when Jim Lee was drawing it and Brandon Choi was writing garbage script for it. Like, it's just suddenly much more entertaining, even if it's more irreverent. But yeah, Spartan shows up, and Zealot, Spartan's like, what the hell's going on here? And Zealot's freaking out. She's like, we have mercs holding the station, possibly with civilian hostages. Tao's tracer indicates Death Trap is inside. This contraption wanted to storm the place without regard for casualties. And so Ladytron says, geez, you immortal broads get so cranky. I guess it's that time of the century again, huh? Again, alluding to the whole point that Zealot is like, I think 1,000 years old or some shit. It's not that time of the month, it's that time of the century. I thought that was a pretty funny gag. So Spartan, ever the straight-laced, everyman, good guy hero, who's just like a stick in the mud ball of boredom, he says, I just left Maul and Warblade at the Exxon building finishing off Tony Twistelli's mobsters. If we can reclaim Grand Central Station, we can probably retake the city. And Zealot's saying, I can't believe Majestic's team let things get like this. It's a city-wide war. And Ladytron says, you'd already done a galaxy-wide war. So, like, what's the big deal with the city-wide war? You guys have been fighting in the galaxy forever. So anyway, now, once Ladytron shuts up and it's just Spartan and Zealot, things get kind of boring. Spartan's looking at this building. Again, it's got a bunch of bad guys in there. They have civilians captured, and so they're trying to plan what the next step is. How do we get in here? I'm going to use my X-ray vision. I'm looking inside. I'm not sure how we're going to go about this. Let's kind of plan our next move. So then we flip over. We get inside the building, and then I keep forgetting this goddamn villain, Death Trap. I'm pretty sure he's like the villain from Stormwatch, who's incredibly boring and stupid and uninteresting, but you got to use him somewhere. So here he is with some of these other characters. I don't remember who these fucking assholes are. Don't care. And again, this is supposed to be a Jim Lee penciled, like Jim Lee layouts. This feels so not Jim Lee. It's kind of got his physical figures, but it feels more like that Carlos de Anda guy. But I don't know. It's kind of fine, but all the magic that Jim Lee had, I mean, Jim Lee's good, but he's off trying to go do Heroes Reborn, so he can't put too much time into this. So again, if he's just throwing down basic layouts and letting other people finish it, it just kind of comes out as okay, but it kind of sucks when it's kind of touted as Jim Lee drew this. Nah, not exactly. Anyway, bad guys are doing bad guy stuff. Hey, we're hanging out. We're waiting for everybody. We're going to execute hostages. We're doing bad guy shit. And while they're holding all these guys, this one dude chained up at the front, he kind of tries to appeal to them, saying that he's a villain. He used to be like a superheroic villain from back in the day. He's like, hey, I'm part of you guys. I just kind of went straight for a while, but can you let me out? And they're like, fuck that. Put him back with the rest of the group. We're going to kill him too anyway. And they talk about this super weapon that they have coming that will turn the tide. We cut to, I guess, some kind of underground storage, and it's some super cyber technological base. A couple characters that I feel like we should know. I don't recognize this one. I do kind of recognize that girl. Doesn't matter. Giant forklift lowering down this giant cylindrical whatever the hell this is. There's something scary inside this. And Death Trap's like, hey, this is something that'll take out the Wildcats and hang them out to dry. Because this is our ultimate weapon. This is what we need. Now we cut to an interlude. This is where Travis Charest takes over. And once again, he's using repeating panels. He draws the panel one time and repeats it and just copy pastes 3 times and then has a reverse angle. The only difference in these 3 panels is he brings up one hand here, the character, he's lying in this bed, and he brings up a hand with the remote to change the channel. Again, it's like Travis Charest taking the fucking shortcut route out. But again, if the script is like, have the character in bed, he's depressed, he's sad, he's mad, he's bailed on his team, he's drinking, he's kind of a slob, and he's watching the news, keeping up on what's going on in the world. If you need multiple panels to let the dialogue explain what's going on, sure. You know what you could do is just fuck these 3 panels. Just make it one big panel with that one image and have all the text across the top. Does it make it any different? You still only get the same one image as opposed to just copy pasted 3 times. That being said, I remember seeing this when I was younger, as I do often with Travis Charest's work. I look at the fine, hyper fine detail that he puts into that. I'm going to bring it up close and hopefully the camera will hold the resolution. Like, I just could not believe that hyper fine detail that he gets into his drawings. I could not understand how anybody could get that kind of a fine line and make it look that good. I think it looks fantastic, even if they're kind of pissed off that he's not drawing much of the book. But the thing that makes this scene great is the dialogue, because Alan Moore is writing this. We're cutting back to, so this is Jacob Marlowe, former leader of the Wildcats. He's he's drunk, he's depressed after the whole scenario that went down on the alien planet. He's bailed on the team, so he's just kind of watching the news. And so we get back to Ladytron. She's there on site where the hostage situation is going. And after she was giving shit to Zealot and those other pages, some news reporters show up and they want an interview on the current situation because it's kind of at a standstill. So this news reporter shows up and he's like, "This is Chet Bickers for CNN outside Grand Central Station. The assembled super types seem to be waiting for something. I'll attempt an interview. Excuse me, miss, could you tell the viewers what your name is?" And so Ladytron, she's right there. She's like, "Huh? Yeah, my name's Maxine Manchester, only that's like my secret identity. Are we on TV?" The news reporter's like, "We sure are, Maxine. Could you tell us about the relationships and the conflict here? For instance, are you yourself a heroine or some sort of evil monster?" And she says, "Oh, well, see, I'm a wildcat, but you won't have heard of us because we're like covert, okay? As for relationships, I'm not in one right now because this guy Max I was seeing ran out on me. Actually, I think he's probably gay, In fact," and they just cut away from her. So just the fact that she's such a fucking dumbass. She's like, "Yeah, my name is this, but it's my secret identity." She's just announcing it on TV. And she's still pissed off at the guy, Max, from previous issues. It's Grifter's brother. She's been trying to get in a relationship with him. He doesn't want anything to do with her. So she's like, he doesn't want to be in a relationship with me. He's probably gay. So I'm like, that's so fucked up. And it's right at that point when Marlowe picks up the remote and changes the channel. He's like, "I'm out of here." There's another news report going on about the crazy crime war that's going on. He just keeps watching that. And then, so we cut back to another scene. This is Voodoo. I think that she had taken off and Alan Moore was writing a miniseries, the Voodoo miniseries, where she's in New Orleans. And this is where she's at. And it's showing how she's like separate from the Wildcats, but she sees on the news the crazy situation that's going on that she is not part of. And so she feels a little guilty. But we get to continue with the news report interviewing Ladytron here. And so she starts spelling out, you cut to just the dialogues but interrupted, but she's spelling his name is Max Cash. And so she's spelling his name, spelled C-A-S-H, and he's probably lousy in bed, like they say, the bigger the gun. And they cut away again, like, "Yes, thanks, miss. That's great. Perhaps I could have a word with you, sir." And so it's just, I don't know why. It just makes me laugh every time I read that shit. And so the interviewer goes over to Spartan, and Voodoo sees that because Voodoo and Spartan used to be in a relationship. God, these are like fucking soap operas. But he's like, "Yeah, we're watching. This is a horrible situation. Anyway, back to, I got to go deal with the situation." Now we cut back to Grifter. We're still getting pretty awesome Travis Charest artwork. He's up on a rooftop. We get a big awesome shot of him, except it's like 90% silhouette. Again, he finds these fucking shortcuts to get out of these pages quickly. He still somehow makes it look kind of dynamic and interesting as compared to some other artists. This is a shit Travis Charest page, and I'm saying that comparing it to how good he can be when he's on his A game. But it's still more dynamic and interesting than most of the other guys at Wildstorm. And again, that's just my opinion. You don't agree, that's fine. I don't care. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, it's his inner monologue. He's in New York. It's at night. The streets are deep canals of light and blah, 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 blah. And it washes away my pain. And it was just a few weeks ago that at Clark's bar when Mike and Dane got into this drinking contest. He's just reminiscing about his buddy Deathblow who got killed. And just a couple of weeks ago, they were all at a bar drinking, having a good time. So Grifter's out looking for his teammates, just kind of walking through the city. Running into some of the Stormwatch characters. There's, it's all kind of like the text is fine. He's just kind of going over like the different characters are doing this. Fuji's there. The crime war's there. It's crazy. Everything's kind of gotten out of control. It's nuts. He finally, he catches up with Majestic, and Alan Moore writes Majestic really well. He's kind of like a Superman character, except he's this version, Majestic, he's super rigid, very much not interested in weird human eccentricities. He's just like this rigid, almost like dogmatic religious guy who's so hyper powerful and super intelligent. It almost like the power level almost outclasses Superman himself. But he's there, and he's kind of at the direction of Tau, helping stop some of these monsters and bad guys. So Grifter shows up. He's like, damn, Majestic, that's the worst case of conjunctivitis I've ever seen. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But Majestic says, if you've come to mock me, Cash, then you are not needed. And Grifter says, sorry, I was forgetting that Caribbean sense of humor bypass. How's the war going? He's like, it's not my war. If I was going to start a war, I'd start it on someone else's planet. That's the Karen way. Karen is, of course, the name of the alien creatures that he is part of. He's an alien. He's like, I'm just helping with the street squabble. It's fine. He's like, hey, there's some other people doing stuff at some other part of town where someone like you who just shoots guns is probably more welcome. You should go there. And so Spartan's like, yeah, all right, well, whatever. Sure, fine. So then he eventually catches up with Warblade and Maul. So now you got 3 of the original team kind of back together, characters that we kind of know. They catch up with each other, and he's kind of like, hey, how's it going? Seems like you guys are handling things fine. They're like, yeah, we are. You know, we kicked their asses. We heard about Michael Cray. Sorry, dude. That sucks. I hope you're doing all right. This is a really interesting page because, again, Travis Charest is rendering these characters in this hyper fine rendering on the faces, and it looks awesome. But then there's that shot of Warblade in the background, and I think that drawing looks great. I cannot understand or tell you why Travis Charest chose to put him in that pose. I've made no bones about the fact that I think Warblade's costume fucking sucks. You know, now if you're an artist who can do shiny metallic rendering and great shadows and musculature and compositions, you can make it look deceptively awesome. But if you're a shit artist, Warblade's costume fucking sucks. And I've always said that these stupid cables just hanging from his back connected to his wrists are one of the dumbest design elements I've ever seen. It's almost like Warblade's holding them up for us as if to say these things are stupid. And eventually, Travis Charest, I'm pretty sure it's his design, once he gets onto the next Wildcats Volume 2 series, he keeps elements of this costume design, but strips it down to just like the mask, the hair, some shoulder shiny metal bits. The rest is just black. All these cables and wires and shit are just gone. And it like retains his design, but looks way more interesting. But yeah, Grifter's like, okay, it's great to see you guys. Remember, Grifter's like, I'm looking for Zealot. Again, his on-again, off-again girlfriend. He wants her. We cut back to Ladytron and Spartan and Zealot, and Ladytron's just like climbing up the building. She's basically like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to go in. I'm going to start some shit. You guys can be a couple of pansies and sit out here. I'm going to go get going. And so Zealot's like, dude, you're supposed to wait. We were supposed to hold on and wait. Help is on the way, you dumb cybernetic bitch. You're fucking up the world. And Ladytron's like, yeah, sure, Mom. Wait up. Don't wait up for me. And so Spartan interjects. He's like, let her go. We can follow her in a moment. There are things you and I have to talk about. Now, this part caught me off guard because I'm pretty sure these stories were brought together in some other comic. I don't know if there was a Spartan miniseries for a while or, you know, like for a minute. And I don't know if that concept was brought up there, but Spartan has always been just kind of a boring character. He's just the leader of the group, but he's a robot and he's got artificial intelligence for a brain. He's kind of a nobody, but somehow, some way, somewhere, way back when these aliens, these Karens from Caribbean come to Earth centuries ago, which Zealot here was part of, so was Jacob Marlowe. There was one of these guys named Jon Cole, Y-O-N space K-O-H-L, Jon Cole, which he then, when he integrated into human society, he became John Colt. And apparently Zealot and John Colt, centuries or years ago, however long it's been, they were in a relationship. But John Colt, I guess, died. But somehow his brain patterns were copied or kept preserved somewhere, somehow. I don't know where all this happened, but somewhere, some way, somehow they got downloaded into Spartan's body. And so now he's alive again, so to speak. And he's like, hey, remember you and I used to fuck a lot? And she's like, no, I kind of set all that aside. I don't want to open up that can of worms again. I put that all aside. He's like, yeah, well, I am John Colt. I'm the guy who loved you, and you dared to actually love me in return. And she's like, no, I cut that part away from me with one stroke like a septic limb and let scar tissue grow around the wound. Grow around the wound. Do not make me open it again. And so Spartan, now with the memories of John Colt, walks up to her, puts his hand on her face, and says, too late, my love, too late. I'm like, stop it. Stop it. Nope. Big splash page of them making out. Spartan has had kind of an on-again, off-again relationship with Voodoo. So he was like sort of pseudo-fucking Voodoo. And now he's sort of pseudo-fucking Zealot. And don't get me wrong, so would I. If I was a comic book character robot with, unlimited stamina. But they're making out, and it's right then when Grifter shows up. And remember, Grifter's had sort of a relationship with Zealot. And so he walks up to see the robotic guy with the unending dick power making out with his girlfriend. And then remember at the beginning of the comic, he says he liked wearing the mask because it hid his tears when he cries. And he reiterates that. He says, yeah, like I say, that's when this mask comes in useful. Because that's the last thing he wanted to see. He wanted comfort from her, and she's making out with the robot. Back with the bad guys in the giant container. They're like, holy shit, it's time to unleash our master plan. The bad guys notice that stupid Ladytron has jumped inside the building, and she's just by herself. She's like, come on, where is everybody? Where's all the bad guys? She says, look, what do you want me to say? Quote, it's quiet, almost too quiet. And then boom, this giant container explodes, and she's standing there and you see these giant robotic monster feet stomping in the ground, and we flip it open, and here's this giant, super buff, super tall, cybernetic monster thing. And I didn't know who the hell this was supposed to be, but Ladytron is flipping out. She knows this guy. She loves this guy. It took me having to read into this a little bit farther. This is Overt Kill. Everyone remember Overt Kill from Spawn? I feel like that was the first appearance of him in a comic. I think in that those How to Draw videos that McFarlane and Liefeld and Jim Lee were part of with Stan Lee, and they kind of like come up with a version of it on the page right there. And then McFarlane just interjected this stupid robotic monster into the comic. It doesn't say right away, but eventually it's mentioned that that's Overt Kill. And then Liefeld had him show up in one of his books and had Badrock fight him. But I didn't know that was him. It doesn't look like him, except when you hear that that's who he is. You can kind of like, I guess it is, with the half face and the robotic eye. But the funny thing is, again, because Ladytron, she's joined this cybernetic religious cult called I think it's the Cult of Gort, or the Church of Gort. And if you know who Gort is, you get it. But she's kind of a religious girl, and they hold all cybernetic life as precious, but she's also a big fan of him just as a being. So this giant, scary robotic monster shows up, and instead of being scared or nervous or pondering how she's going to fight this evil monster, she's geeking out like a fangirl, like he's a fucking rock star. She's like, oh my God, it's you, isn't it? You are like so cool. You're bigger than Marilyn Manson, Trent Reznor, just about everybody. And he just goes, yeah, I guess. She says, I got to have a piece of paper or something here you can sign. Geez, I can't believe this. I used to have your action figure, man. I got the trading cards. I got the poster. And she says, and then there's that track by Cranial Hemorrhage where they sample you saying, eat Teflon, you scuttle little twat. I got that too. He's like, this is a nice building, isn't it? Which window do you like the best? And she's like, what? Why do you ask that? And of course, on the next page, boom, her ass is getting thrown out through a window. So that was hilarious. Again, Alan Moore is just like, what can he come up with to make this interesting and funny? And Ladytron is hilarious. She's absolutely stupid. She's psychotic, and I love her. So she gets thrown out the window. So Spartan and Zell are looking up like, what the hell was that? And then that's when Grifter kind of makes his presence known. He's like, it's the Wildcats' other mechanical member, Spartan, or is it John now? Maybe we should help her. And Zell, it's like, Cole? Oh, shit. I didn't know you were there. Please don't think, she's like, oh, no, it's not what it looks like. He's like, yeah, don't say anything, Zealot. Thinking hurts. You two do whatever you want. I'm going to go bail out the kid. So Spartan runs after Ladytron. He's like, don't go back up there. Don't go alone. And she says, I gotta. This is destiny, man. I can feel it in my manifest, which is a funny play on words if you understand. So they go back inside. There's Overt Kill. And Grifter sees it. He's like, give me some backup here. We got death traps and his mercs and the biggest fucking cyborg I've ever seen. And so Spartan says, that's overt kill. He's a black file, extremely dangerous. So yeah, that's where it explained who he is. And like I said, I didn't know who he was. So they start shooting him, and Ladytron is jumping on his head. She says, his head's supposed to come off. How come his head don't come off? Man, I paid like $20 for that action figure. What a crock. And it's alluding to the fact that I think in both Spawn and Youngblood, overt kill had his head take off and just fly off. So he slams Ladytron down into the ground, and so Overt Kill's standing here, and he says, I heard of you. You're that cyber broad that dismantled Harm. Ain't you? Harm is a robotic character that got killed. She's like, oh, right, bring that up. I guess he was like a friend of yours, right? He's like, nah, couldn't stomach the guy. Personality like a pocket calculator. It's just, the principle of the thing. So he starts unloading bullets at her. She has to tumble out of the way. And so Ladytron starts cursing him out. She's like, lousy, overgrown, Japanese manufactured, un-American son of a Mitsubishi. I'm gonna, wait, who are you? She recognizes the guy who was in the crowd that said he was a bad guy. And he was kind of trying to get out of he was trying to appeal to the villains, like, I'm one of you. And so she sees who he is and knows who he is. So she dives at him to get him, but Overt Kill grabs him, or grabs her, slams her up against this column, smashes her hard. And so now Ladytron's on the ground. She says, hello, Halo, it's Maxine. I found the guy who bombed Clark's bar and kicked off the war, but it doesn't make sense. He ain't with the bad guys. He's with the hostages. The bad guys don't even know him, so he can't have been working for them. And they cut back to Tao at the headquarters, and they're like, holy shit, the transmission's going. This looks terrible. And Tao says, he just ends the comic. He's looking serious, and he says, I'm afraid we've lost. He's like, we've lost the war. The end of the issue. So there's a lot going on. If you don't know the backstory of all these characters, it could be incredibly confusing. But once again, Alan Moore, as usual, crafts a story with humorous takes. And I can't tell you how much I love this Ladytron character. She's hilarious. She's funny. She's a weird goofball. And just the way that Alan Moore writes her, like I keep saying, I just feel like he is having fun with her. And it just makes the comic that much more interesting. But anyway, that's Wildcats 31. We're getting close to my end of the run of Wildcats. I have issue, I think, 32 or 33. But then Jim Lee stopped drawing it. Travis Charest stopped drawing it because he went off to go do that Wildcats X-Men crossover. And they had some fill-in artists, and none of them were really that good. Not enough to make me want to keep collecting it. I also want to say, I think Alan Moore stops writing it very quickly. And it just became uninteresting. And I stopped collecting it until... I've got it sitting here somewhere. God, I just had it. Yeah, right here. Issue 50. Which is the final issue of Wildcats Volume 1. And Alan Moore comes back to write a short story. James Robinson, you got Jim Lee, Travis Charest, Brandon Choi writing some crappy stories. So anyway, issue 50 is the end of the first run of Wildcats, and that's coming up quick. Like I said, after this issue 31, I think I've only got one more, and then I stopped collecting it. But then I heard issue 50 was the end, and Jim Lee and Travis Charest are back on art duties, at least on some capacity. So I'm like, I had to pick that up. So there's a big gap in the stories. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but, at the time, I'm like, well, might as well pick that up. But anyway, issue 31 of Wildcats. Entertaining. Pretty fun, and, anytime Alan Moore's writing the Wildcats, it's at least pretty good. So that's all I've got for this one. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time.